Sword Art Online Volume 1 Aincrad, the book where the massive SAO saga began with the short story of Floor 74 and 75, with a little flashback to the blissful day one experience of Kirito and Klein. It's been 12 years since the story officially came out in Japan, around 2 decades since it was originally written by Reki Kawahara, and boy oh boy, the writing of Kawahara sure has come a very long way. Without going on a tangent in this intro, very recently I had the opportunity to revisit the novel that ignited the phenomenon, as it boldly and rightfully stands on the back of every single SAO book, in quite the unique way. The audiobook version, voiced by Kirito's English voice actor, Bryce Papenbrook, released by Yan Press's new audiobook initiative, Yan Audio. So, this was the perfect chance to have a review of the very first SAO light novel that was published officially, as well as having a look into the offerings of an audiobook in general, which I always approached with skepticism, especially since I'm extremely stingy about names from phonetic languages being butchered to no end by native speakers of non-phonetic languages, and looking at a little poll I made in my YouTube community tab, which got nerfed considerably since spiffing Brit caused a lot of shenanigans to YouTube systems, handicapping my reach to your opinions. Please subscribe, like, and hit the bell icon. I seem to be sharing a lot of common sentiments regarding audiobooks in general with a majority of you guys, putting me in a good position to share my review with you particularly. So, without further ado, let's get into it to have a look at the book itself, the concept of audiobooks in general, as well as Bryce's performance as Kirito in the realm of books. Welcome to GamerTurk's audio book club in this case, and this is
Sword Art Online, Volume 1, Aincrad. Written by Reki Kawahara. Translated by Stephen Paul. Cover art by Abashi. Read by Bryce Papenbrook.
You know, I never had a plan to do something like this, but it was a very unexpected surprise for me coming from Yan Press at a golden time with the progressive movie on the horizon. And it was incredible to see how much Aincrad had changed and taken a proper form, rather than the equivalent of a pilot episode that it was back in Volume 1. So, when Yan Press offered me a review copy for their recently released audiobook voiced by the one and only Bryce Papenbrook, Kirito's English dub voice actor, I was thrilled despite the fact that I was still at my summer house back in Turkey, without proper equipment, about to go for a vacation to southern Turkey where I'd have even worse conditions to do a timely review. So of course I jumped on the opportunity and got instantly slapped in the face by how much I underestimated the time commitment of an audiobook. I'll be honest, it was an experience to get adjusted into, but an overall enjoyable one nonetheless, after my mind just accepted the fact that there were no visual things for my eyes to follow. Did I ever mention I do not like radio for that exact reason? It takes effort to not do anything with your eyes. Anyways, the review will have sections, of course, one for the actual contents of the book itself, which is for all of you who want to know how the very first story of the series holds up against the rest of the series and how Reki's writing has changed and improved. The second chapter will be about the most integral factor of the audiobook, which is Bryce Papenbrook's performance, coming from someone who has quite a distaste for the American anime dubbing industry, TM, and there's a reason why I'm being that specific and narrow in my description. You'll find out why in this chapter of my review too. And the third and final chapter is about my impressions of the audiobook as a concept, which is for that 2/3 of you lot. The rest of you have pretty clear opinions from what I can see. Timestamps are of course there to help you guide or skip through the video, so if you get impatient, have a look at them. They're gonna be quite detailed. A list of links will also be in the description to grab the audiobook if you are interested and to look forward to more.
Chapter 1.
Oh boy, as the resident SAO person on YouTube, subscribe for all the latest news and the most accurate information on SAO, I have to be blunt, and you may be surprised hearing this at first, but this Aincrad in SAO Volume 1 is so much different than the Aincrad we know from later in the series, as close as Volume 2 in fact. It's partially caused by being one of Reki's earliest works of course, but the fact that the narrative of Aincrad changes so much as soon as SAO Volume 2, the very next book featuring the side stories for Sachi, Lisbeth, Shilika and Yui, let alone stories that were written way later like Murder Mystery and The First Day in Volume 8, The Day Before in Volume 22 and the Progressive series, it is is largely due to something else than just Reki's writing style improving. The narrative and explanations in Sword Art Online Volume 1, they feel extremely primitive and simplistic. They are not designed to be elaborate, but easy to understand and quite in your face if you ask me. The imagery and descriptions feel like an afterthought in the narrative, whereas it just feels like Reki wanted to focus on an exciting scene while saying, wider perspective of the scene be damned. Sword Art Online Volume 1 hits strong and is impactful on the exact perspective of a scene that it wants you to visualize in your head, depicting action as in a character acting, not necessarily action scenes, vividly and colorfully that makes you hold your breath until the sentences are over and the full picture is drawn in your head per Reki's exact instructions. At the same time, on the other side of the spectrum, whenever something is an in-between moment that your brain does not need to visualize stuff in 4K 60 FPS, the writing, the descriptions, they become as pale as a flower that hasn't seen the sun in a long time, as if Reki is going, don't worry about this stuff, I'll eventually tell you these in a better way, which does make sense if you look at what this book actually is. For those of you who didn't know, the original story of Sword Art Online was written for a Dengeki short story competition, the winner of which would get their book published by Dengeki. Being a habit of Reki Kawahara, when he wrote the story that would later become SAO Volume 1 featuring floors 74 and 75, so the final days in Aincrad, with a little flashback into the first couple of hours with Klein, he overwrote his short story and ended up being above the allowed page count. He later won the competition with Axel World, his other series, which will eventually go into wink wink, SAO United Ring is going in an interesting direction. I cannot wait for swift translations, dear Yen Press and dear Stephen Paul. And alongside Axel World, he got SAO published as well, which was gaining a lot of traction as a web novel on the internet. The point was that the contents of this book, SAO Volume 1, they were kind of a prototype of what Aincrad would be, which Reki always had a plan to expand on with side stories here and there, even way before Progressive existed as an idea. The best analogy I can give it is a pilot episode for a TV series that tries to showcase everything that is great about a series to a new audience or executives, while not particularly caring about minute details that it can provide at a later time, at a better time, let's say. Sword Art Online Volume 1 really feels like a pilot episode in that sense, giving you some really strong moments to get you accustomed to the world and the tone of the series. But when you are someone like me who's 25 volumes of main stories, 8 volumes of progressive and countless self-published or limited release side stories into the series, as the SEO expert, I just go, haha, cool story, bro, but that's totally not what happened here, and I'm not even talking about the countless retcons. Even within Volume 1, if you compare the two high points of action in the book, the Gleam Eyes battle and the Skull Reaper battle, you know one or the other is not a truthful depiction of how a floor boss fight happens. And the rest of the series basically confirms it's the Skull Reaper Ray that's the status quo aside from his milestone floor buff. Thus, we absolutely know it's the Gleam Eyes battle that could not have taken a couple seconds and a single skill taking down 3 entire health bars like that. And it all comes back to what I said earlier. Volume 1 aims to give you a fun experience of Aincrad to pull you in, rather than an accurate and detailed experience for you to analyze. And it does its job well. As I was listening to the audiobook, no matter how many times I giggled going, haha, that's been retconned too, referencing more recent releases of course, it has remained a very enjoyable story. Although it has kinda given me an idea that I should probably go through it again at some point and try making an everything that's been retconned so far from Volume 1 video, just for funsies. If you never experienced Sword Art Online before, which you certainly have, how would you be on my channel otherwise, Volume 1 is definitely a great entry to the series despite how much of it has been retconned by this point. It sets up the atmosphere, gives you simple and easy to understand explanations, while also introducing you to a core cast of characters in a digestible and colorful way. And despite being so dated and technically covering the final days of Aincrad, I would still say it's a much better entry point to the series compared to something like the Progressive series, which starts up from the events of Floor 1, while expecting you to have a certain level of familiarity with the series to enjoy to its fullest. And if you are already familiar with the series, there's not much you'll find in Sword Art Online Volume 1 in this book, to be honest. The general rule of book is better than the adaptation, it still applies here, as you rarely get explanations in the anime adaptation, but the explanations in the book are so simple anyways that you probably already deduced that much on your own if you are an above average anime viewer, let's say. And if you are already a light novel reader and are watching this review just for shits and giggles, you already know how dated and simplistic Volume 1 already is.
Chapter 2.
Thanks for that announcement, Bryce. I was just about to start talking about you. What's the worst way of starting a section? Let me tell you a boring story about myself. Bear with me as I believe this is the best way to illustrate my point of view on the sensitive topic of sub versus dub and why Bryce did an amazing job in this book. Ever since I was a kid who learned how to read, my dad always took me to movies that we watched exclusively in Turkish sub, never the Turkish dub. I grew up watching English movies when I knew very little English and other movies in languages I didn't even understand one bit. People usually have the mindset of just read the subtitles and not listen to what they are watching when they don't understand the language, but that was never the case with me. Even if I did not understand the language, I grew up with the habit of very carefully listening for tone and emotion to pair that with the subtitles I was reading. For all I knew, emotion and tone, it did not have languages. It was the very same thing in every single language, so I could get it just by listening. I only learned that emotion and tone somehow did have different languages according to certain dubbing industries that preferred localizing more than they were dubbing. Different sectors do this to varying degrees, of course, but it was almost always impossible to find the same intended direction when it came to voicing a character between the original and the dub, no matter what that language was. I never particularly cared whether Sid from Ice Age sounded better in Turkish dub, but Manny sounded better in the original English, but I did care that I did not get to see the intended portrayal of a character and got what a guy in a Turkish office thought was quote-unquote better instead, whether it was actually better or not. As a result, I distanced myself from dubbed media as much as I could to experience the tone the creator intended rather than the localization. As a result, I distanced myself from dubbed media as much as I could to experience the tone the creator intended rather than what the localization thought was best. While it is my preference to consume non-dubbed content, generally it is not a make or break for me. Most industries still do align with a certain direction that it does not cross my personal preferences of how much they change characters. You know, whichever is the most recent Ice Age movie, I'll still watch it in Turkish just fine. I play Sonic games in English, not Japanese. But when it comes to anime, the dub generally irks my ears a bit too much. It always feels like they water down the characters into stereotypes for easier consumption for the masses, for them to relate to characters faster so they get hooked faster because they feel like they know the same character already due to the familiar voice. In plenty of places, Kirito is known as the cool, emo main character for this exact reason, despite being much more of a nuanced character. The problem only gets bigger when I listen to Kirito and hear Bryce Papenbrook, then switch over to Attack on Titan and hear Bryce Papenbrook again. It's like specific voice actors being cast in specific stereotypes and just play themselves in a different series with a different paint job. Luckily, I am not as foolish as I once was as a kid. I know this is not on the voice actors themselves, but rather the voice directing, and it's not even a blaming game here. There is no fault to blame on someone. It's simply a decision. The effect is intended by the studios, and that is easy to figure out when the same voice actors from anime industry go over and work with a game company, and suddenly they get a vast voice range to work with in a single game than they ever did in the 30 different anime titles they worked in. These guys are professionals, they have incredible voices to use if the higher ups just let them do their thing rather than going, yeah, just do that voice again. What I'm getting at is that this audiobook is basically yet another showcase of this, that Yen Press / Yen Audio, they let Bryce Papenbrook do his thing, just letting him have fun with all the different voices that he gets to have in this book. Sure, he is Bryce Papenbrook for the majority of the book, as the narration is from Kirito's point of view, and he is using his trademark calm and cool and emo-like Kirito voice from the anime, but everything else, Klein, Egil, Kayaba, Korvats, random townsfolk, even Asuna, is voiced by Bryce himself, and all have distinctly different voices and aptly different speech patterns to go along with their personalities. Of course, you may encounter a problem here, given that you are accustomed to certain voices from the anime adaptation, and thus your ears just decide to reject the voice your brain was not expecting from a certain character. But that's not on the voice performance provided by Bryce, that's more of an instinctual, weird human habit, and I don't think it should even be a point that needs addressing in detail here. In my opinion, Bryce Papenbrook absolutely did a phenomenal work with the cast of characters of Sword Art Online Volume 1, and I am sure he would be able to do a little bit more with Kirito too if he had some room for freedom from his shackles of the anime, but that would also cause other issues, as audiobook by Kirito's voice actor is kinda one of the main selling points here, so it had to be Kirito. Now, Bryce doing an absolutely amazing job in this audiobook, having such a range across the board with all the characters, I was not surprised by that. It's the same thing I have experienced time and time again with different series, in which a voice actor suddenly shines a whole lot more when given the freedom or provide a better voice direction. Heck, Jason Griffith is my favorite Sonic the Hedgehog voice actor, and his debut in Sonic X anime, it's just sounds dreadful to me. Sometimes I even wonder about the inner workings of dubbing in different industries when two very similar sectors, Japanese games and Japanese anime, have such wildly different approaches to it, to dubbing specifically, despite literally crossing over series and workforce all the time. I just can't help but have questions. Maybe if one day I get to have an interview with a voice actor from the industry, I can have some light being shed to the scene. Wink wink. Bryce senpai, call me. What I was more concerned about going into the audiobook was the pronunciation of Japanese names. I know some people may see this as a nitpick, but let's be real, if I was going Bryce Papenbrook, as I would pronounce it in crude Turkish constantly, you would have dropped this video long ago, so false pronunciation of a name in a foreign language can be deeply annoying, and American English dubs for anime, I can't even say they fall to this trap way too often. It's more like they just embrace living in this hole. I will say that it's not as bad as I feared it would be. Knowing their audience, the pronunciation of Japanese names was definitely given a lot more thought in the audiobook than they did in the anime. They are generally cleanly pronounced without the forced English intonations that do not actually exist in those names. However, certain names still had consistently recurring minor issues, like the weird pronunciation of R in Kirito, which I know the R is indeed hard to properly dictate for native English speakers due to certain tongue habits, or Kayaba sounding too much like Kaiba or Kaiba regularly. Again, it is clear a lot more effort went into the name pronunciations and it shows, but I think going 100% would be beneficial, while also acknowledging that some of these are really hard to fix in one speech. I watched enough accent expert breaks down from Wired to realize that. And to the 1% that says, blah, talking about accents when he has an accent himself, you are correct, that is why I do not voice your audiobooks. You are welcome, but if you need a Turkish character voice, call me.
Chapter 3.
And that brings us to the final chapter of this review, the concept of an audiobook. This was my first ever audiobook experience. I have to say, even after successfully completing it, it is still a strange experience for me. The biggest issue I had in my experience was that my mind, it just constantly expected some supporting signal from my eyes relevant to the material. It felt like the prioritization of input signals constantly had my eyes above my ears in an instinctual manner, and my train of thought just ended up slipping until I realized. Like, when I watch a movie, I view the screen and sound accompanies it. In a visual novel, I again watch the screen, read the text if there is any, and the sound is again complementing that visual. When I read a book, I just read with my eyes and visualize what I'm reading in my mind, as my eyes keep tracking the words and my brain is just automatically converting them into images. So out of all those different ways of experiencing a story with eyes first, the audiobook going, just listen and screw what you're seeing, it's been jarring to say the least. For some reason, my eyes going idle was harder than I imagined, as if they were the main anchor of my mental focus. I found my eyes constantly getting stuck on something and quickly changing my focus from imagining a vivid image of what I'm listening to into what I'm actually looking at and breaking me away from listening. I don't know, man, maybe I'm just old at 25 already. Saying all of this feels like I'm talking like a grandma, talking about how y'all use those full screen smartphones without accidentally touching all them buttons and then coming for help because the phone did something on its own. But an audiobook, it is certainly a different mindset, a really different way to experience a book that requires getting used to. For example, one of the main benefits of an audiobook is like being able to experience the book when you are driving a car, but I don't see myself being able to do that at this point. Not because I prefer driving stick or because Istanbul traffic is utter shit that it requires too much of my attention, but because I could not even listen uninterrupted lying still on my bed while watching the spider on the ceiling, and now it's going towards the wall and getting closer to the window. Maybe I can manage to yeet it out and get rid of it.
Shit! I switched tactics, unleashing the dual blade's highest skill, the Eclipse.
Wait, when did that happen? How did we get here? Jokes aside, I do believe an audiobook shines when you are doing routine work that has become so regular that your brain needs no processing to do. Washing the dishes or going out for a jog, put your headphones on and listen while your activity is on autopilot, which just makes me feel like it is the perfect accessibility add-on rather than its own standalone product. When I was listening to the book, I always had something in the corner of my mind eating me. I got videos to edit, but I want to listen to this when I can just read it faster than I can listen and be done with it quicker. It is the exact same feeling I have back in my dorm when I'm reading the book. I want to keep reading this book, but I gotta wash the dishes. What I'm doing is just not the efficient thing here. And that's when it clicked for me. I just wish I had both a book and an audiobook version and just seamlessly switch between the two, but unless you want to deal with text-to-speech stuff on your phone, which I want to reiterate that Bryce's performance has been absolutely great, there is no such option, and I don't want to deal with text-to-speech, seriously. As someone looking into audiobooks as an outsider, as a primarily physical book reader, that is what I hope we'll get to one day, without me having to purchase two separate copies, where the audiobook and book versions will simply be part of the same product, allowing me to read at my own pace, drinking my hot chocolate from a mug next to my window, and then switch over to my audio as I put down reading and go wash the mug because I'm still a student living in a dorm with no dishwasher. And it does kinda sadden me that I don't think that's where the audiobook concept will ever go, and it will remain a separate product, and I still don't have a dishwasher and spend 20 minutes each day washing my own dishes because university is a long and grueling process. Can't wait to start my master's degree this semester, which will only make it worse. Some other considerably smaller things I want to mention, more relevant to SAO specifically, or light novels specifically, rather than all audiobooks in general. Well, you see, Sword Art Online does not have a third-person narrator looking at the events from the outside. It is mostly Kirito doing the narration, or a secondary person that we are following for a specific chapter or a story, like Asuna in some parts of Progressive or Yu-Gi-Oh in some parts of Alicization. Well, in a written medium, a quotation mark instantly gives away that you switch from narration into speech before you actually read what's being spoken. It's an automatic process that adjusts your brain. In an audiobook with a third-person narrator, this does not create an issue. Whoever is doing the voiceover simply has a different tone for the narrator and the different characters that they are voicing. You can probably see where I'm getting at. When your main character is the narrator, it becomes a little muddled. Still wouldn't cause any significant issues since narration is usually emotionless and speech has some sort of emotion to differentiate it. Well, it does become a problem when your main character voice is cool emo kid voice that speech and narration start getting mixed into each other because the way your character speaks is equally emotionless as the narration most times. I did not mention this in the section where I talked about Bryce because this is not technically an issue about his performance but rather a result of his mandated voice, and that's where I'd love to see Yen Press/Yen Audio allow Bryce to bring a little bit more color to his base Kirito voice. I found myself getting bamboozled way too many times when Kirito said something and I only realized he was actually saying it out loud rather than thinking it when Bryce's narration mentioned "I said" after the utterance. words, and vice versa when he mentioned something like, I wanted to mention but held myself back. It's not a big issue, but if the books convey whether something is being said from the get-go with a quotation, I do believe the audiobook is somewhat responsible to try conveying the same thing the same way, and a small color in tone would do it just fine. Second little thing I want to mention is, well, I know these are audiobooks, but they are still books, right? They should be able to feature all the material that is present in the actual book itself. Light novels usually come with a lot of illustrations. Sword Online light novels always feature a dozen beautiful illustrations from Abek to bring these events to life with expressive visuals. Now, I do not know much about the audiobook platform, so I'm guessing this request may just faceplant at a virtual wall at the platform holders, but I do believe the audiobook versions should just come with a little image archive along with its audio downloads. Of course, the audio should not cut off and yell, "Please check illustration 7." But you know, something like a folder that I can access optionally by clicking the 3 dots and going into illustrations. Having the SEO book experience feels a tad bit incomplete without the amazing illustrations being accessible by Abek. Abeshi. I really need to start using the name properly. Even Bryce did it correctly in the book. I have no excuses anymore.
Afterword.
All in all, Yen Audio is an initiative by Yen Press that has delivered a book absolutely full of quality and worthy of praise, with a great performance by Bryce Papenbrook, slightly held back by the fact that I am not so used to audiobooks as a concept, but also because Sword Online Volume 1 definitely not being peak Reki Kawahara, about a dozen or so volumes far from it in fact. For those who do not like reading but still want to experience the source material, there's simply no better choice than these audiobooks. Well, saying audiobooks plural, hoping we'll get more of these of course. Catching up to United Ring may take a while, which is a bummer for long-term fans looking to kick things off with V21 United Ring 1 to follow up on the ending of Alicization anime, but I would certainly wish Yen Audio to jump on the progressive series a little too without waiting too much. Would be particularly thrilling for fans in the light of the new Ari of a Starless Night movie. Starting the series with Bryce, it was quite the high bar to set. I do hope they can either continue with Bryce completely or even better, have alternating voices depending on the point of view of the book. For example, when we reach Volume 9 Alicization Beginning, the book may just be shared by both Bryce when Kirito is the narrator and Brandon Winkler when Yujiro is the narrator. This of course can be a little too ambitious due to the amount of different perspectives when Reki goes ham in War of Underworld with a bajillion perspectives. But hey, well, one can dream, right? At the very least, core cast members being utilized could be a good compromise and will receive a lot of praise from the fans. I will still be continuing to hold on to my physical book collection for the moment, despite how much harder it has gotten due to Book Depository still shipping from the UK after Brexit. But in an increasingly busy world where utilizing your time efficiently is getting more and more important, I'll be keeping an eye as to where this audiobook initiative will lead. Wait, I can actually listen to these on the lifts when I go skiing, can't I? I think I found my gold mine here. Let's go, Winter. Hope you found this review helpful or informative. It literally would not have been possible without Yen Press, who have sent me a review copy as I was perfectly content with my physical collection. So again, huge shout out to them. I have been GamerTurk, your best source of Sword Online information on YouTube, and Brandon Winkler, if you wanna play Alicization Licorice together, I'll be here.